Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to go over an upcoming action RPG called Mortal Shell. If you have not heard of this game yet, Mortal Shell is a Souls-like punishing third-person combat-focused game with an expected Q3 2020 release date on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. We finally got to see the gameplay reveal as well as a new trailer. I'm going to break down the gameplay for you guys in this video. We're going to go over one of the shells, some of the items that we saw, a boss fight, and much more. And at the very end of the video, I'll show that new gameplay trailer, so you're going to want to stick around for the entire video. This game looks really promising for those of you who like a challenge in a dark fantasy setting. Let's get right into it. In Mortal Shell, your character will be inhabiting shells, and there will be 4 unique shells to choose from. Each shell will offer you a unique style of combat, and they will all also have their own history that you'll unravel and learn more about who they initially were. The shells are basically the playable characters, or classes, whatever way you want to look at it. You'll start the game with no shell at all, in a much more vulnerable state, and upon discovering the shells through exploration, you'll have the option to inhabit them and over time unlock all of the abilities and history that goes along with them. I will show one of the shell's menu screens here in a minute. When you choose a shell, it's not necessarily a permanent choice. You can switch between the shells you've found, but you're probably going to want to find a good amount of them and see what each of them offers to find your favorite playstyle before you fully commit to one. You might get to an area of the game where you're having a really hard time, and switching to a different shell might better suit that particular situation. Now here's the cool thing that we learned for you hardcore players. You do not have to be in a shell to beat the game, but it will be extremely hard for you'll have a really low HP and limited stamina. There may be some tactical advantages to being shellless, however, but you better not get hit. If you look hard enough, you can even find an item that will have you officially renounce all shells. That's pretty hardcore. Alright, now let's take a look at an actual shell's skill menu and break it down. Right here, the player is walking up to one of the first shells that you'll likely come across, called Heros the Vassal. The first thing you'll do is learn the shell's name, and after that, each time you learn a little bit more about their history and also acquire a new ability. As you can see right here, after we learn the shell's name, we got a couple sentences revealing a little bit about the story behind the shell. The brigands pointed us towards the temple. Shunned by the devout, their allegiances lie with those who offer tar or spirits. They entertain themselves with drunken antics or violent cruelties. They know better than to attack us, but they followed us at a distance, hoping for scrap. So it seems like the start of an epic story that we'll eventually learn as we progress with this shell. As you can see, the center of the circle is the indicator of who the shell is, and on the outside going around the circle there are 7 abilities, or maybe 10 depending on what those smaller circles on the bottom are. The ability highlighted to the left here is called Accretion of Foresight, which is described as picking up a glimpse has a chance to restore some health. If you notice on the top right of the screen, it says tar 948 and glimpse 6. This is how much tar and glimpse your character has. This specific ability is stating that when we pick up glimpse, we have a chance of regaining some health. So glimpse is something that certain enemies will be dropping when you kill them. If we look under the skills description, you also see tar and glimpses again. In this case, we're learning that you'll need to offer or spend 700 tar and 6 glimpse to be able to acquire this specific skill. Tar and glimpse both seem to serve as some form of currency to acquire new abilities. The next skill we see is called Accretion of Dominance. For 3 seconds after hardening, enemies killed have a 10% chance to drop an additional glimpse. So hardening, for those of you who do not know, is a skill that when you activate it, it seems to negate any damage done to you, but it also requires precise timing. Here's an example of hardening in combat. So with this skill, if you use hardening and kill the enemy within 3 seconds after, you might get an additional glimpse. As you can see, this skill requires 7 glimpse to acquire, and it's showing red because the player only has 6 at the moment. Accretion of Resolve is an ability that reduces your Harden cooldown by 25%, so now we know that Harden will have a timer on it, you cannot spam it. Accretion of Endurance and Accretion of Ascent are showing as locked in the demo, but at the bottom right here is Accretion of Inheritance, which will make your Harden last for twice as long upon being broken. When you purchase an ability, you get some new lore behind the shell, as you can see here. A story is starting to form, for it follows the sentences that we read earlier. So that's what we saw from the Heros Shell skill menu. Now let's take a look at a cool feature, the Workbench. Right here, the player walks up to a workbench and up pops a menu showing a couple interesting things. The first thing we see is apply weapon enchantment, which in this case it's described as the sword's mechanisms are configured for a second spike. We got some weapon upgrading going on here, and not just in a stats type way, but actually allowing you to seemingly change the physical features of your weapon. It's pretty cool. Underneath this, we see Apply Quenching Acid 1, which increases your weapon's strength. Tarnished Seal Runes 1 boosts the healing effects of empowered ripostes. There will be some sort of riposte system that actually looks similar to the one in Sekiro. Here's an example of riposte. And the last thing we see at the workbench is Tarnished Seal Offering 1, which boosts Resolve Acquisition. Each of these workbench activities require a certain unique item, which tells us that we'll be finding and looking for unique items to bring back to our workbench throughout our journeys. In the gameplay, we watch the player pick up items such as Tar Spore, which deals poison damage over time, Wealth Caps, which is a way of healing over time, and Spectral Tokens, and much more. We also actually got to watch the player playing his loot. Now let's take a look at the user interface. In the bottom left, the most obvious thing we see is the health bar, and below that is the stamina bar. The 4 mini bars above the health bar I think is kind of like your resource pool for using your shell's abilities. The bar seems to drain slowly when you're not doing anything, but as soon as you land a successful strike on an enemy, they increase by a small amount. When the player performs attacks which appear to be the shell's special abilities, the bars drain down, appearing to be what was required to do the actual ability. Over to the bottom right, we see your tar and glimpses that you currently have, and above that is this mysterious box that shows an icon and a couple numbers. This box appears to be the item that you currently have equipped. Right here, the player has equipped Glimpse of Futility, but during this fight he switches to Ethereal Diapason, which he consumes, restoring his ability to reclaim his shell upon death. So this box seems to be the item box that you can cycle through depending on what you want to have available at that moment. The last two things I want to go over before we show the new gameplay trailer is a boss fight as well as the general world and what to expect. We had the pleasure of watching some form of boss fight, and you guessed it, it will have a giant HP bar on top of the screen. The animations and mechanics behind the game seem to be working very well. The combat looks very promising. I really do hope this game turns out like the Souls games where people start making boss guides and stuff like that. As far as the world goes, the studio said that it's compact. The reason why they said this is because they are a very small studio. They wanted to make sure that all areas of the game were made to be the best that they can be, instead of expanding too large to where you sacrifice quality. I really love hearing this, quality over quantity any day in the gaming world. There will be one open area and then levels going off of the open area that you'll try to complete. Completing the game is said to take around 20 hours, so it's not big but it's not small either. They said that every part of the game should be meaningful. They don't want to send you off on quests where you're farming rats and stuff like that. Don't expect a big cinematic story though, instead think of it kind of like Dark Souls, where you play the way you want and unravel the story behind what you choose to play. I do enjoy games like this. Sometimes it's kind of nice to take a break from long cutscenes or a never-ending story. There will be no mini-map in the game. I absolutely love hearing this. If anybody has played Outward, you'll understand why, for it forces you to learn and kind of memorize the areas. It makes you use your brain, unlike many other games. There will be replayability, for you might want to play other shells, upgrade your weapons differently, or even try a shell-less playthrough. I'm sure I missed some things, but it was definitely fun trying to learn and figure out more about this game, which appears to be a gem. I love when smaller studios take on intense quality projects like this. And the way this game appears so far, they definitely have my support. I'm going to leave you guys with the gameplay trailer. I appreciate you guys watching. I look forward to seeing some of you guys on a future video.
I do not deserve absolution, yet still I seek it.
You must find his name.